Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 422, an intro to virtue, part 2, the 3 degrees of virtue. The podcast objectives are reveal why you should never underestimate your enemy, reveal the main event of your conquest for power, and analyze the relationship between complacency and defilement. This lesson contains timelines and other visuals. Therefore, if you are listening to the podcast, I advise you to watch the video version on our website or YouTube, or request a PDF of the lesson so you can add the visual effect. Never underestimate your enemy. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 236 of our exposition of lawlessness. In the most recent podcast, we began our intro to virtue, i.e., the third of the 16 primary degrees of holiness and the focal source of all spiritual power. In that podcast, we proved how our loving master and his disciples were men of virtue, which is why they were able to consistently demonstrate the power of the Ruach. It is because they were strong men who were truly devoted to Elohim. Even in the face of death, they were willing to guard the command. This allowed them to have power with Elohim. And as I said before, the focus of this power is virtue, the first level of transformation. From now, we must take a closer look at this prominent degree of holiness so we can understand the steps we must take to operate in this amazing power. To wit, we must analyze the 3 degrees of virtue as we have prior done for obedience and faith. Now, per the image to the left, the fundamental degree of virtue is honesty. As you have likely guessed, honesty is designed to defeat the spirit of dishonesty, i.e., the fundamental degree of contempt. Now, it goes without saying that this will be a difficult battle for many. And it's not because dishonesty is an overpowering degree of lawlessness. Quite the contrary. On an independent scale of power, dishonesty is one of the more minor enemies you will face in your quest. And yet, he is ravaging our nation and the world on a most prolific scale. To wit, dishonesty, although an inferior foe, is having terrific success in spiritual war. He is winning battles he should not be winning. And mysteriously, he has become one of the most effective degrees of lawlessness. And if you would receive it, he is in the top 10 as it pertains to success rate, while he is nowhere near the top 10 on the scale of power. I'll show you why this is the case as we analyze the war between honesty and dishonesty. Until then, I admonish you again, in the spirit of the watchman, never underestimate your enemy. Trust me, The enemy you take lightly is the enemy who will defeat you, and you never saw it coming. The main event of your conquest of power. Now, the next series of battles you must fight in your war with contempt is with unrighteousness, i.e., the focal degree of contempt. Unlike dishonesty, unrighteousness is one of the most dominant degrees of lawlessness you will ever encounter. Here is why. Some of the battles you fight with lawlessness are with enemies who are more subtle in nature. For example, dishonesty. On these occasions, your enemy is generally only effective if he can distract you or deceive you into adopting a false reality. Only then will he go for the kill. On the other hand, some of the battles you fight with lawlessness are with enemies who are bold and brazen in nature. For example, unrighteousness. On these occasions, your enemy is not wasting his time trying to distract you. Quite the contrary, he is coming to overpower you because he is convinced that he can dominate you. Now, the sad reality is, in the case of unrighteousness, this is often true. Why? It's because unrighteousness follows dishonesty, wherein lies the problem. Consider this, my friends, and be advised. The man or woman who operates in dishonesty has no chance at withstanding the onslaught of unrighteousness. He or she will not last one round. And by the time they finally come to themselves, the only honest thing they might say is, "What a blitzkrieg." Now, as this is surely the case, it will take an extremely formidable degree of holiness to defeat such a powerful degree of lawlessness. My dear friends, do not worry. Rather, be of good cheer, for we have a champion. Righteousness is here. Per the image to the left, the focal degree of virtue, which is designed to defeat the spirit of unrighteousness, is righteousness. Surprise, surprise. Now, it goes without saying that your war with unrighteousness will be a heavyweight fight. To wit, we are talking about two of the most powerful degrees of lawlessness and holiness going head to head and toe to toe to determine which side will reign within your heart. Remember, unrighteousness does more damage in your heart than any other degree of lawlessness does in your entire being. Alas, the impact of unrighteousness is indeed great and terrible. As I said aforetime, it is a sore evil. Ergo, it will take an even greater and more powerful degree of holiness to defeat him. Enter the spirit of righteousness, i.e., the focal power of virtue and the focal power of the set apart spirit of Elohim. I will show you how to wield this focal power in future podcasts as we analyze the war between righteousness and unrighteousness. Trust me, you won't want to miss these lessons, for this is the main event of your conquest of power. And as I said before, we're all going to need more power. The power to purify ourselves. Now, the final series of battles you must fight in your war with contempt is with defilement, i.e., the critical degree of contempt. Along these lines, defilement, like all the critical degrees of lawlessness, is strategic in his approach. To wit, the goal, i.e., strategy of contempt, is to employ the powers of dishonesty and unrighteousness to keep you in a state of defilement for the following reason. I have shared this matter aforetime, and if you didn't bookmark it then, I advise you to bookmark it now. There is a persistent partition between the Father's goodwill and all who exist in a state of defilement. Now, do you see how strategic defilement is? To wit, he waits for you to succumb to the other two invading armies of contempt, and then he strategically arrives onto the scene to put you into fetters and chains. Not only this, but after he puts you in fetters and chains, he drains you of your spiritual power. Alas, of the 3 degrees of contempt, defilement is the deadliest from the viewpoint of a spiritual virus. And he is deadlier than any degree of lawlessness we have discussed thus far. My dear friends, he is even more lethal than complacency on an independent scale. And considering what we have learned about complacency, that is saying a lot. So, allow me to tell you the backstory on these 2 degrees in the form of an interest point. Now, the goal of complacency is to subject you to every degree of lawlessness, and it is the only degree of lawlessness that has this power. To achieve this sinister goal, the spirit of complacency must first open the door to defilement. He must enslave you to this degree of lawlessness. In doing so, he will ensure that you are at all times in contempt of the Father's will. Here again, this will create a persistent partition between you and the Father's will, which is how complacency subjects you to every degree of lawlessness. By strategically opening the door to defilement as his first order of business, complacency gains the power to subject you to every degree of lawlessness. Now, if you didn't see it before, I trust you can see it now. My dear friends, we are not dealing with some penny ante operation here. Quite the contrary, we are dealing with a criminal mastermind. Listen to me. The spirit of contempt is the real deal. And the only way you will defeat him is by countering his strategy with an even greater strategy. And said strategy must be designed to achieve one critical goal. Do not defile yourself with iniquity or sin. Now, per the image to the left, the critical degree of virtue, which is designed to defeat the spirit of defilement, is purification. This makes perfect sense. For how can you be defiled if you are persistently being purified? The short answer is you can't. Ergo, you will find purification to be one of the more critical powers you will ever unlock. For purification will defeat the work of complacency by ensuring you are not defiled. This opens the door for the Father's goodwill to transpire in your life. This, my friends, is the beginning of your realization of the restoration message and the power we have been given to purify ourselves from all lawlessness so that we can obtain the seal of Elohim. Amen. Now, here is the final word. The one sure way to win each fight is to do your best in what you know is right. My dear friends, this battle strategy will be front and center in your war with contempt. To wit, the key to eliminating this spiritual disease is always doing what you know is right. Very soon, you will see how this is the primary objective of righteousness, one of the many super features of holiness, and one of two degrees which defines the way of holiness, the other being wisdom. Heretofore, I recommend that you pay the more earnest heed to unlocking the powers of honesty, purification, and righteousness, for you will never achieve one node of transformation if you settle for anything less. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on all the lessons you have heard this week and ask the Father to give you clarity on anything you are struggling to receive. And if you are led, please feel free to reach out to me. You can fill out a form on our website and let us know what questions you have. And remember, the only question that can truly hurt you is the one you fail to ask. Last but not least, enjoy the upcoming Shabbat and the weekend, and be ready to get back at it next week as we continue to make our calling and election sure in pursuit of the precious and priceless seal of Elohim. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 422, an intro to virtue, part 2. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 423, an intro to honesty. I will post this podcast on Monday, February 24th, 2025. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.